From the 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store.
Hi, everyone. Bill Rentschler in the 1011 Now streaming studio with sports director Kevin Sjuts for another edition of the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dogs. Appreciate everyone for tuning in and watching as always. Got some Husker football to talk about, Husker volleyball, some Husker basketball news, but obviously the big stuff, Husker football. Again, we talked... It was a little 10-11 after dark action, late Saturday after the win over Colorado. How do you feel?
Might have been Sunday morning.
Yeah, Sunday morning. How do you feel after a couple days of digesting, hearing Rule on Monday, coordinators and players on Tuesday?
It was a lot of fun. I mean, sometimes fun home games, they kind of come and go in the lifespan of, relishing that moment, 48 hours. Mm-hmm. The team does the 24-hour rule. I think some of the media members, some fans, it's a couple days and then you're on to the next one. I really contend that Nebraska-Colorado atmosphere, it's going to be one that people talk about for years and years to come, and it's been fun just sharing stories with other folks that were in attendance late Saturday night as Nebraska defeated Colorado.
And shout out to our colleague Mason Kern. He dug through. Travis Hunter apparently does a TikTok show, and Mason stumbled across Travis Hunter talking about the environment last Saturday and said that it was loud.
Top 5. Top 10.
And said that, Nebraska came out and punched him in the mouth. And then the crowd noise, it was through, third down, it was every down. It was loud and it got to him.
And Deion Sanders has been very complimentary of Nebraska, the crowd, and the Nebraska team that beat him 28-10. But I wasn't surprised that Matt Rule on Monday, a couple days after that game had concluded. I mean, he's just such a mastermind of motivating his team and keeping them level-headed. The fact that, as much as everyone's relishing in the 18-point win, he referenced, I think, 4 or 5 different things, Bill, that he was displeased with from the standpoint of the game. He said it's one of the worst special teams performances he's been a part of in a long, long time. Called it awful. Mm-hmm. He said the worst.
I think he said
worst.
The worst. Yep,
the worst. They did it 3 times. He was also critical of Nebraska's perimeter blocking. He felt like offensively some of the players aren't playing at the standard of Dylan Raiola. And he's, I think, referencing all of these things publicly to prevent complacency and to really challenge his team to take the next step as Nebraska enters week number 3.
Yeah, he said he had the film session on Sunday. He did it in front of the whole team, and so he could call out players who weren't meeting that standard, whether it was perimeter blocking. He went into snapping on field goals and things that might be causing issues. And so and again, because this is kind of a classic trap game, you have a really emotional high with Colorado. You think I think I said it Sunday morning, yeah, they should probably win. But, they're a good FCS team, and, you got to keep your foot on the gas.
The big thing about the Northern Iowa matchup coming up is it's a completely different style of play that Nebraska has faced in week 1 and week 2. They played a couple of spread offenses, teams that can go up-tempo and can beat you on the edge. Now you have an FCS opponent that's 2-0, ranked 21st in the FCS. They play between the tackles. They rush for nearly 300 yards per game, and they go right at you. So Nebraska, conceptually, on defense, is going to face something totally different. And I think if you're Nebraska's coaching staff, it might make you feel a little bit uneasy. I think they know their players aren't going to rest on the laurels and the success so far this season, because that's kind of part of the DNA of the Blackshirts right now. But this is a defense that can have success against the spread. How do they do when they know that a 3rd and 2 run is coming right up the middle?
With a 240-pound running, they got some big dudes, not just on the offensive line, but in the backfield. Kind of reminds me of when Nebraska would line up, I think it was Jaquez Yant. Mm-hmm. He was a big guy, but they got couple of big dudes that are going to be running the ball at him.
So it'll stress the Huskers on tackling, which they've done a pretty good job of so far this season. And then just playing the game a little bit differently. And, the pass rush, which has been very effective the first 2 weeks, just by nature, it's not going to be as needed in this contest. And we're not trying to say this is going to be a close game. It could be, but Nebraska, I believe, is a 4 or 5 touchdown, 31-point favorite, I think?
The line I looked on FanDuel, and it's 27.5.
Okay, so a 4-touchdown favorite.
Yeah. But it's kind of a perfect game to get them ready for Big Ten play, because you look ahead past you and I, they host Illinois. Could be a ranked Illinois team coming to Lincoln next Friday. So, obviously in the Big Ten, outside of, maybe some of the West Coast teams that are joined this year, but it is a running, physical league. Not to say UNI is going to be the physicality of a Big Ten team, but they're going to get you kind of prepared for that.
Yeah, and Tony White, Nebraska's defensive coordinator, first off, I think everybody is finding out why Nebraska increased his salary. And it wasn't just to keep him at Nebraska when he had other opportunities away from Lincoln, but because he's worth a lot of money.
He's earned it.
He can scheme up a defense with the best of them, and his head coaching career isn't too far away. But he's got this defense playing at such a high level. Nebraska's numbers defensively are outstanding, really good against the run. They're creating turnovers now, and they're getting to the quarterback. But he said on Tuesday practice, like, the stats, they're last in the country because everybody's last in the country. They haven't done anything, and that's just part of that cultural approach for Nebraska, week to week, 1% better. And you see those signs all over the facility. But they're not just speaking it into existence. It is everywhere. And so we'll see what they do this year. But I think that this is still going to be a team that's pretty motivated to try to get to 3-0, and they just want to win the next game. And if that's their approach, they're just going to let the season kind of navigate wherever it goes. But they're not going to overlook Northern Iowa.
No, they're not. 1-0 each week. And that kind of leads me into my next point, which, again, obviously we had talked late Saturday, early Sunday. Would we see the Huskers in the AP Top 25 coaches poll? They did appear, number 23 in the AP poll, 24 in the coaches poll. Matt Rule was very like, we have other things we want to do. That's, we're cool that we're there, but that's not where we want to finish.
He did say that's about where we should be.
Yeah.
Did you catch that? I mean, he just snuck that in there. And I think everybody kind of nods in agreement. Yeah, so far through 2-0 and the way that Nebraska has played, I don't think anybody's shocked that they're ranked because they look like one of the top 25 teams in college football. And if you were to say, hey, Nebraska's ranked, where do you think they're at? You would say probably between 20 and 25. So I think he's right on point with that. But that's just like, that didn't even come across as arrogant to me when Rule snuck that in. I just felt like it's just a confident coach that knows his team and understands the outside perspective as well.
Yeah, and again, just very much like, okay, yeah, cool. 1-0 every week. That'll take care of itself. We want to do even more than that, but cool. Again,
especially it was a wild week of college football, too. There's a ton of movement happening right now. And, man, wasn't last Saturday like a Nebraska fan's dream scenario?
Such a good Saturday.
Iowa loses at the last second. Notre Dame loses. Not that Nebraska and Notre Dame are, bitter rivals, but it's just a program that I think a lot of Husker fans, for one reason or another, they don't like. So Iowa loses, Notre Dame loses, Colorado loses, and you're the one responsible for that result. It was a good day.
It was and Michigan lost too. I mean, that means Texas won. So I mean, that's mixed feelings there. But Michigan got spanked by Texas. Texas is a good team.
Texas is a very good team. Michigan is not near the team they were a year ago.
Well, they lost 20, I think, or so players to the NFL, but
a coach
to the NFL. So, but yeah, so all good vibes kind of coming out of the Colorado game. You also had Christian Jones from Omaha West Side. He decided to jump in the ship. He committed to Nebraska. He is the top in-state prospect, depending on kind of where you look. So again, he had been kind of down to maybe Oklahoma. I think he had visited some other schools, but he jumps in the ship. So again, all good vibes right now for kind of Husker football moving forward.
Yeah, how about all the momentum behind this program? We can think of season after season after season where there's a lot of ups and downs, but right now everything is on the way up, and there's so much momentum. The fact that they're ranked, they just beat a rival. You have a young freshman quarterback where everybody's imaginations are running wild with what Dylan Raiola could potentially be. The schedule the next couple of weeks fairly favorable for Nebraska. Then you got Travis Hunter complimenting, and you have all these national reporters of college football who are just saying nothing but amazing things. They're saying that Memorial Stadium this past Saturday was college football heaven. And those videos and pictures, they're running wild on social media. And then, oh, by the way, on Wednesday, you have Patrick Mahomes talking about Dylan Raiola, and he had a very positive remark about Nebraska's freshman quarterback.
Yeah, let's listen to what Mahomes said. This was earlier today at their press conference.
What's your reaction to Nebraska quarterback Dylan Raiola sort of mimicking every single aspect of your preparation and almost even the way he throws?
Yeah, it's cool. Honestly, I was that guy. I grew up watching players. I remember when I would grow up, I loved Alex Rodriguez, played shortstop, and would try to make plays just like him and do stuff like that. And it helped me become the athlete that I am. And so it's just telling me I'm getting a little old. I think that's the biggest thing is that you have these guys that are coming up and doing some of the sidearm stuff and everything like that. But I know Dylan. I trained with him in the off seasons. Great kid, a great football player, and I think he's gonna make his own stamp on the game. And I think you've seen that early in his career.
Has he acknowledged that some of the stuff he's doing is mimicking you? It seems like publicly he's been hesitant to say that.
Yeah, I don't know if whenever you come in as a freshman, you want to be on Twitter and be the part of the team. I think he wants it to be about his team, and I think that's the right way to play the quarterback position. Is that it's not about you; it's about going out there and having success as a team, and they've done that so far this year. So even though I think he just kind of wants to push this out and play football and go out there and win football games, and I think that's the right way to play the position.
So what world are we living in? The best quarterback in the world is talking about the Nebraska football program, specifically their freshman quarterback.
Yeah, and I think some people are like, oh, he's copying. Well, that's what we all did when we were kids. We have our favorite players. And he's come out and he said, I wear 15 because I was a fan of Tim Tebow growing up. So that's completely, different. But yeah, they got good hair and they got the little goatee going on. I would have the goatee going on too if I could grow the goatee, but I can't do it.
The physical resemblances,
it's uncanny.
They're pretty striking.
It is.
And we've spent some time talking about that previously, but man, Dylan's leaning into it. Now you have Patrick Mahomes talking about Nebraska football, and if the Huskers stay relevant, that conversation's not going anywhere. I think the fact that Nebraska played well on network TV as well, and we haven't mentioned the viewership numbers.
6.3 million.
It was really high. I think it was the highest rated Big Ten football game on NBC since the new TV partnership.
Yeah, and so. If Joel Klatt, I love listening to Joel Klatt. I think he's great.
Big pro Matt Rule guy.
Yes, and he's basically been saying, even dating back to the preseason, if they can just turn the quarterback position from what they had last year under Sims and Harburg into just sort of like even, that Nebraska was going to take a big step forward. You look at the first two games last year. Jeff Sims had 7 turnovers, I think. 0 turnovers per Raiola thus far.
Yeah, if you look at the quarterback spot, if we pause right there, Bill, if there's a pendulum, Nebraska on the quarterback scale was in the negative, just based on all the turnovers and late-game mistakes. And I think what Joel Klatt was saying is just get them so they're straight up and down, 12 o'clock, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Dylan Raiola didn't do that. He took him on the other side of the ledger because now he's making plays. His third down conversion rate's pretty good. He's pushing the ball downfield. We've seen some electric plays at the second level, and he's taking care of the football.
And it was surprising to hear, again, you mentioned it, but Rule basically calling out the rest of the offense because they're not playing on his level. Satterfield said, that doesn't mean they're not working hard, but that, he's so prepared. He's got the 120 play, script or book or whatever it is. If he can do all that, there's no reason that, the senior, whoever that might be, can't have all that down.
Well, Dylan's a film rat.
Yes.
He is always at the facility. He gets up early and he goes watches film and works out, and then he does, everything else that the team is required. And then at the end of the night, he's back in the film room and doing more, preparation just individually. So, he sets a pretty high bar.
He is. He does. It's a very, very high bar. So, again, from what we've seen from the first 2 weeks, and now you have Northern Iowa, what's kind of the one thing that you want to see maybe some improvement on this week? Is it the special teams issue? Is it maybe some more downfield passing, which didn't see a ton of necessarily against Colorado? Not necessarily anything defensively. That's been pretty buttoned up so far.
Yeah, I think the field goal unit hasn't been great. Tristan Alvano's missed a few. I think he's got 2 misses on the season. And, they're going to need to be able to make kicks later in the season, especially when the weather turns. Mm-hmm. I think you got to get some field goals in now. And, of course, they'd rather have touchdowns. But if you have an opportunity to boot a couple of 30-yarders, 40-yarders, build some confidence with that field goal unit because that is going to be needed later in the season. So I think that's one area of improvement that I would like to see from Nebraska. And I think fans are kind of maybe if there's a little bit of concern at what spot is it, the field goal unit is one. And I did Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, like he's doing a really good job on the punt return end. I want to have him bust a big one. I think he might already have more punt return yards through 2 games than Nebraska did all of last season.
Yeah, and Matt Rule even said you guys aren't talking enough about how good of a job he's doing.
So I like that. I'm not saying that needs to get better. I just hope, I guess my one wish list for Nebraska versus Northern Iowa is that Garcia Castaneda can take a punt for a touchdown or have like a substantial return that gets Nebraska into the red zone.
I would, on the other side of that coin, the kick-off unit, I mean, it's going to happen, but Ja'Cory Barney housing one, whether it's a kickoff return, taking one of those pop passes around the edge, catching a 2-yard pass over the middle, and turning it into 80.
Well, whenever that happens, you know what everybody's going to do once he crosses the goal line. They're not looking at Ja'Cory Barney. They're looking at the rest of the 100 yards on the field for where's the flag.
Yeah.
Every big play by Ja'Cory Barney is called back because of a penalty.
Yeah, it has been. It's been unfortunate. And again, that's one of the things that needs to get cleaned up. I think Rule had said, it was like 9 penalties, but it was like 160 yards, I think, that was lost by those penalties. It's a huge number.
Yeah.
Huge number. So there's a couple things. Kickoff 6:30 again, another primetime game. Big Ten Network. You got our announcers over there?
I do. Big Ten Network on the call is going to be Guy Haberman, and your in-studio or in-the-booth analyst is going to be Yogi Roth.
Don't know if I've heard of either of
Not
those
the
two.
Big Ten Network's A team, but it is Nebraska versus an FCS opponent.
It is. So 6:30 again. Huskers, according to FanDuel, just looked it up. 27.5 points favorites.
You mentioned night game.
Night game.
3 straight night games for Nebraska.
And Illinois next week, 7 p.m. kickoff.
And that's the Friday game.
That'll be the Friday game.
But that, when was the last time we've spent years previously, Bill, talking about the 11 a.m. kickoff.
But that's how Rule likes it. One of the big quotes he had Monday was kegs, eggs, and football, man.
Kegs and eggs and football.
That was all
Let's
over
go.
my TikTok. Yep.
Well, that made it to Barstool Sports and national media, and that 8 seconds, 12 seconds, whatever it is from Matt Rule, his preference. 9 a.m. football, kegs and eggs and football. Let's go. I've already seen the shirts available for purchase that say kegs and eggs and football.
I would buy one of those shirts. I think that would be fun.
Let's talk after this. I got a guy.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so that's and then next Friday is obviously Illinois. That'll be a big one. That 7 p.m. kick that you just mentioned. Other big news: volleyball. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, Kevin, but it was actually last Tuesday. John Cook and his squad went down to Dallas, get swept by SMU. I believe it was the first time in a long time they've been swept by an unranked conference opponent. But they bounce back. They sweep both Citadel and Montana State this last weekend here at home. And then the big match was last night. Creighton, number 9 Creighton, first time they've ever met as top 10 teams. And it looked like they were going to sweep them. That third set was incredible to watch, 33-31, I think. I think the Huskers had 4, maybe 5 match points. They lose. They kind of get run out of the building in the 4th set a little bit, but then they do manage to win the 5th set and remain perfect against Creighton.
22-0 all-time against the Jays, and John Cook said ahead of the match, this is probably the best Creighton team that he's ever faced. And watching them, that Creighton team's good. And there is a chance, legitimate chance, that those two teams could meet if the bracket plays out the way fans want it, deep in the postseason. Because Creighton's going to make a run. They're talented. Yeah. And Nebraska's going to make a run. They are very talented. Man, what a fun match. If you think about some of those epic games at the Devaney Center, we have an early candidate for best home match, and we're not even halfway through September. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, and that's before you have teams like Arizona State, Wichita State, Long Beach State coming this weekend for another little tournament, and then they host number 2 ranked Stanford next week. So what have you made of John? Again, before the season, we talked about the embarrassment of riches that he has at his disposal, some of the transfers that have come in. What have you made of sort of the lineups that you've seen thus far this season?
Well, I think Nebraska has its go-to lineup, and it's very similar to last year's. but he's still mixing in Layla Black. We saw her get on the Layla Blackwell get on the court last weekend. Taylor Landfair, how do you use her? They've inserted her at times. But the old trustees are the old trustees. Harper Murray played very well against Creighton, and she carried that team through most of the match. And we saw some huge rips from Harper Murray, especially in set 3 when Nebraska was trying to close it out. And now a sophomore. I think the ball's jumping off her hand even more than it did a year ago. And I think she's playing with a little bit more. I think Harper's confidence is growing as this season is going along. But from a lineup standpoint, I don't want to say it's last year's lineup, but it's kind of last year's lineup. That's what I think John Cook feels most comfortable with Becca Alec and Andy Jackson playing in the middle. And perhaps the most valuable and most impressive player on the team is Andy Jackson.
I was going to ask you about her because she was good last year. I mean, but I feel like Becca Alec was probably better. But not that Becca Alec's bad, but I feel like Andy Jackson's just gone to a whole new level.
There are some pictures that Nebraska shared on the volleyball social media accounts where her armpit is over the net. And her vertical is just ridiculous. And there's even one photo that I think they posted maybe Tuesday, the day before the Creighton match, where Andy Jackson is not only over the net, her arms are stretched out over the net. So whatever the length of her arm is, a couple of feet, it is what? This is not normal. Mm-mm. She is a freak athlete, and Andy Jackson is, in my opinion, the best player on the team.
Yeah, she's right up there again with, Merritt Beeson struggled a little bit.
I'm going to change that. The most impactful player on the team. If you have a middle blocker that can be a threat defensively and offensively, and then also just make plays solely off of athleticism. Because sometimes when things get helter-skelter, it's really hard for middle blockers to be involved. But because Andy is so athletic, you can never just count her out of a play.
Never, yeah.
And so for Bergen Riley, it's not as simple as, well, we're just going to throw the ball to the pin because we're out of system. No, you could still throw it to the middle and let Andy do something with it.
You could not throw it to the middle last night, though. There was a brief period, I think in the third set.
Yes.
The Huskers were out of substitutions, and Lainey Choboy got in the front row. She tried her best. I think she had some tips that she got, but she's probably what, 5'5"?
I think she's 5'3", Bill.
5'3". So she's
playing middle blocker,
standing next to these girls that
and Becca Alec then had to play right side.
Yes.
I mean, that's just what's going to happen with you when you rotate the way Nebraska does, and it goes extras, and you start, both teams siding out, and you go past 26-26, you go past 28-28, and then they were in the 30s, and there was nothing Nebraska could do. The team was on the court.
Yep.
The 6 players. There was no other rotations or substitutions Nebraska could do, so they started, rotating around, and then it looked like Nebraska was just trying to continue to just side out and try to get Laney back in the back row. But that was kind of comical. But every special match
has those moments.
Has something unique and fun to it, and there was a similar situation last year on the road where Nebraska was out of substitutions, and Macy Bosiger rotated and had to play, I think, left front for a few plays.
So they host the Nebraska Classic this weekend. That starts Thursday. But like I already mentioned, Arizona State, number 14, Arizona State, Wichita State, and Long Beach State are in town. So the Huskers will play Arizona State Friday evening, and then they're scheduled to play Wichita State Saturday afternoon. It's a good batch of teams there.
Arizona State team, that's a pretty good team.
And so if you look at the ABCA rankings that came out, again, after Nebraska's loss last week, they did drop from number 2 to number 5. Last week when I was talking to Chase, I had said, if they take care of business this week, they should be ranked number 1 because Texas had lost to Minnesota, and then they ended up getting swept.
Read the top 5.
So you got Pittsburgh, Stanford, Penn State, Louisville, Nebraska. All 5 of those teams are receiving first place votes.
I didn't hear you say Texas or Wisconsin.
No, Texas dropped to 6. Wisconsin dropped to 8.
We'll revisit this in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
those two are like, that's just how crazy college volleyball has been right now.
Yeah.
Texas and Wisconsin still probably among the top 5 teams in the country, but they just suffered some early season losses, and the scheduling has been so aggressive for some of these elite programs, and it's resulted in chaos early on, and it's a lot of fun. But I think it'll maybe level out as the non-con starts to wear on and teams get into conference play.
And if you look at the top 10, I think there's only 5 teams that are actually undefeated. I mean, in the top 10, you have 2 teams with 1 loss, a team with 2 losses. Wisconsin has 3 losses. Kentucky has two losses. So there's a lot in there. Minnesota, who beat Texas, they're 1-3. Their only win is Texas. I think they did win last night. So they're 2-3 now.
It's good for the game.
It is good for the game. It's been really exciting to see the uptick in volleyball coverage. SMU, coincidentally, did not crack the top 25.
But SMU had another big win last night, and somebody posted upset. And I read that, and my initial reaction was, let's stop calling this an upset. I think this SMU team is really good. It's just they're not getting the credit that they deserve, because now they've beaten a pair of pretty impressive opponents in Nebraska and Baylor, and maybe that's not a bad loss after all. Maybe Nebraska just went down on the road and played a really charged-up opponent in a pretty raucous environment, and they lost.
Yeah, it happens.
It'll happen, yeah.
It happens. Also, as a side note, Allie Batenhorst and USC ranked 23rd in the latest poll. So yeah, that's volleyball. So should be some good matches Thursday and again on Saturday, and then hosting Stanford next Wednesday, 7 p.m. That match will be on Big Ten Network. That'll be a matchup of 2 top 5 teams. Nebraska beat Stanford in Palo Alto last year on their way to winning their first 27 or 8 matches.
Yeah, that was maybe the confidence booster for that young team a year ago. With all those freshmen last season, how would they all work? How would they mesh together? And what was their ceiling when they won at Stanford? I think that was the match that all those players pointed to of realizing how good they truly were.
Yeah, they won that match.
So Stanford's going to come in here pretty fired up.
Yeah, they'll want some payback after last year. Wrapping things up, Kevin, basketball. We actually got some basketball news today. Again, the season doesn't start till late October, but the Huskers will be hosting their sort of open night for fans to come and hang out with the team. Usually it's been in PBA. There's been some sort of scrimmage or something. Not the case this year. Something a little different. I'm intrigued by it. It's actually going to be outdoors in the rail yard. Set for October 4th, I believe, at 7 p.m. And they're going to be just kind of hanging out in the rail yard. I'm assuming that there's going to be a hoop set up there somewhere, and they're going to have some fun.
And if it rains, they will not reschedule. That was very clear in the announcement of the event. But hopefully there will be good weather. They're going to still do the team introductions. They're just going to do it outside. They can mingle with fans. I'm sure there's going to be autograph opportunities. There will be a few contests along the way. We don't know specifically what that will be. And both Fred Hoiberg and Amy Williams will address the crowd as well. So no scrimmage. That's fine. Yeah. And it's also homecoming weekend, so there's going to be a lot of activity around town that weekend as well. So add that to the Friday calendar. You get to watch a little Nebraska basketball, or at least see the players.
At least, yeah, out in the rail yard. That should be, again, that's a perfect little spot for them to do something like that again. Hopefully the weather cooperates. I'll talk to Ken, see if we can arrange.
When I first read the headline at the rail yard, I got the images of, the 3-on-3 tournaments outside where they set up a hoop at the Cube, and they would do a little 3-on-3 mixtape kind of style.
That'd be fun.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Probably not.
It's just going to be more of a nice to see you kind of event.
Yeah, but it should be good. I think that's all I got, Kevin. You got anything else?
No.
All right.
Week 3.
All right, you and I, 6:30 kick. We'll have coverage. Oh, I'm just going to ask you so people can get maybe a little behind the scenes. Game ending at 10 p.m. The amount of chaos that ensues for you, for Chase, and just trying to get stuff on air and get in the right place to go live.
You want me to paint the picture?
Paint the picture.
I don't know if this is going to make people
grab your brush
excited or just say, Kevin, we don't care. Feel free to do that and click off right now. We'd like you to stay tuned, though. So the end of that game, with about at 9:55, I had our newscast in my ear. So I am on the field with a camera on my shoulder, and I'm listening to the commercial breaks run before our newscast. So I'm in my head. You think that the fans were just tired of the refs throwing flags and slowing the game down? I just wanted the game to end so we can get to the newscast. So then I'm listening and I hear all the microphone checks and everything, and it's quite the mental challenge to focus on the game in front of you, but also in the back of your mind be hearing everything that's happening in studio. Then the game finally ends. We're already in our newscast, and I'm listening to, our first report, which was a really neat story on a fan who's 93 years old and a long-time Nebraska football season ticket holder. So I'm trying to listen to that story, but then again, focus on the game. And the game ends, run onto the field, try to get some video of the scene, and you just want to see the guys celebrate a little bit. But then all of a sudden, I'm landlocked because the students rush the field. And I need to get off the field because I'm going to be live in our news in a matter of 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And, it's not as simple as just, hi, I'm here. We got to get the camera set up and everything. So, as cool as the students rushing the field was, a part of me was really upset about it because I'm no, I got to go. I got to go. I'm trying to find my way to the northeast corner so I can exit the field. And so, truth be told, Dylan Raiola is running off of the field, with his arms in the air, and he's got a couple of teammates around him and one of the policemen as well, kind of escorting him. I am running right behind Nebraska's starting quarterback. He's going to the locker room. He veers right. I veer left because that's our way to our post-game setup. And then, there's a sky bridge that connects the practice facility and the Memorial Stadium. If anybody happened to be walking outside and looked up at the sky bridge at about 10:08 p.m., they would have seen some crazed guy with a suit jacket, camera on his shoulder, and a couple of cords dangling from him, sprinting across the sky bridge. That was me. And then you go down the steps around the corner. Camera goes on the tripod. Again, I'm listening to the newscast, and at this point, Chase Madison is in studio reading the highlights, and he's expecting me to be available to give some on-field commentary the second he's done. So he's in, third quarter highlights, and I'm 30 seconds away from being on air. We're not quite there, but that's what happened.
For some perspective, in my ear, because I was filling in doing weather that night, in my ear, I hear the producer telling Chase, stretch, Kevin's almost there, stretch, Kevin's almost there. So trying to stretch that out. So, yeah, it's
So I ran over there, camera down, jump in front, literally 30 seconds after arriving at the camera, I had the microphone in front of me and was ready to talk to Chase live on air. It was quite the rush. I might have been a smidgen out of breath, but we pulled it off.
You did. You did a good job. But needless to say, probably night games or 6:30 kicks with games ending right as the newscast starts. They're not my favorite.
Well, 6:30 kicks, one of two things can happen. They can end at 9:30, and it's a great thing. Or they can end between 10 and 10:35 when we're live on air, and that's not so fun.
No, it's not so fun.
But it does make for good TV, and plus we get to hear from the coaches.
Yep.
And during our 10 o'clock newscast, and none of that was a complaint, by the way. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a game within the game for us media folk, especially TV. We got to have the live report from the field. We got to hear from Matt Rule live on air. We got to hear from Deion Sanders live on air. And then we got some live player interviews, and I talked to Micah Mazuka and MJ Sherman. And MJ Sherman was fantastic.
He was. It was all good stuff, but there's a lot of chaos that happens right at the end of the game, especially right on a newscast end, because there's very explicit rules. We can't air any of the highlights and stuff until the game is done.
Correct.
So, the game ends at 9:45, 9:50. It's great because we can show all of our stuff. But that's the reason why Chase, if you watched again 10 o'clock, Chase was just showing scoreboards at the very beginning of the newscast because the game hadn't ended yet.
Correct.
So. But
the second that the national broadcast signs off, that is our green light that we can go, and that's when Chase started the highlights, and that's when I am trudging my way through the crowd and then running across the sky bridge and getting in front of the camera.
So, yeah, there's just a little bit of how the sausage is made. So it's always interesting in the TV news business. So, Kevin, appreciate you as always. I know you got a busy day ahead. I know you're going to have end report stuff coming up 6 and 10.
Oh, we got Know Your Husker coming up tonight at 10.
Can you give us who the Husker is?
No.
Okay.
Just going to entice everybody to tune in tonight at 10. So far, we've had some fun ones with MJ Sherman and Mekhi Bayer.
Okay. All right, we'll have to tune in to see.
And they're also this year sharing with us their favorite local restaurant.
Ooh, okay. What have been the restaurants thus far?
MJ Sherman likes a place called The Taste of Louisiana on North 27th. I hadn't heard of it, and so now he's piqued my interest. So Taste of Louisiana is MJ Sherman's favorite local restaurant, and Napoli's down in the Haymarket area is Mackay Bayer's go-to.
All right, there we go. We didn't mention it, but Mackay Berry played a whale of a game. Will be suspended. They appealed it. It will be suspended for the first half against Northern Iowa, so we'll have to see how that potentially shakes out. Kevin, appreciate your time as always. Appreciate everyone for tuning in and watching for another edition of the End Report Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dogs. We'll do it again maybe Saturday night, early Sunday morning. Who knows? If not, we'll be here next week. So appreciate everyone for tuning in and watching. Until next time, hope everyone has a nice Wednesday.
You've been listening to the End Report Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dogs Convenience Store. Watch, listen, and stream on the 1011 Now app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more Husker coverage throughout the week, watch The End Report on 1011 Sports at 6 and 10 p.m.